What we're really asking here is not whether ghosts float around hallways or whether some shadow stands behind you when the lights go out. The deeper question is whether consciousness continues to observe, to notice, to witness, even after the physical body that once anchored it has stopped working. In other words, when a person dies, does whatever made them them still look back at the world they left behind? And if so, what does it see? Every culture in human history, separated by oceans and thousands of years, has arrived at some version of the same idea: that death is not an erasure, but a transition. Ancient Egyptians believed the bi and the ka, aspects of the soul, could leave the body and return. Tibetan traditions describe a consciousness that moves through intermediate states after death, aware of what is happening but no longer tied to flesh. Indigenous cultures speak of ancestors who remain close, watching, guiding, sometimes warning. Even in modern accounts, people who have nearly died often report hovering above their bodies, watching doctors work on them, hearing conversations they should not have been able to hear. This is not fringe anymore. Hospitals have documented cases where patients in cardiac arrest later described specific events that happened in the room, while their brains showed little or no measurable activity. They knew who entered, what was said, where instruments were placed. Something was paying attention. If awareness can exist without the brain for even a few minutes, then the idea that it might continue afterward is not as absurd as it sounds. It suggests that what you call you may not be generated by the brain, but filtered through it, like music through a radio. When the radio breaks, the music does not stop existing. It just stops being received in that particular place. So imagine what that means for the moment after death. The body goes quiet, the heart stops, the brain shuts down. But the signal, whatever it is, does not necessarily end. Instead, it may suddenly find itself no longer trapped inside a biological shell. It may experience the world in a way that feels wider, clearer, and strangely detached. Many people who have had near-death experiences say the same thing. They felt more aware, not less. They could see in all directions. They felt like they were not inside their body but around it. They watched their own physical form from above. They felt calm, even curious. Now consider what that implies. If someone dies in a room with you in it, there may be a moment where their awareness is still there, watching what happens next, watching the reactions, watching the grief, watching the confusion, not in a spooky or threatening way, but in a quiet, observational way, like someone stepping out of a vehicle and looking back at it. There are countless stories of people who swear they felt a presence just after someone died, a sense of being watched, a sudden warmth, a pressure in the air. These experiences are usually dismissed as shock or imagination, but they are remarkably consistent across cultures and time periods. Children, who are less conditioned to reject strange perceptions, often talk about seeing or sensing loved ones who have passed. They describe them standing in rooms, sitting quietly, watching. They don't describe fear, they describe familiarity. From a physics standpoint, consciousness might not be as localized as we think. Modern theories about the universe suggest that information is never destroyed, only transformed. Every particle that makes up your body, every electrical signal in your brain, leaves an imprint on reality. If the universe remembers everything, then the pattern that was you does not simply vanish. Some scientists have even suggested that consciousness could be a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or time. The brain does not create it, it tunes into it. When the brain dies, the tuning device breaks, but the signal remains. So what would a soul do when the body is gone? It would not suddenly become blind or unconscious. If anything, it may become more aware. Freed from the limits of eyes and ears, it may perceive in ways that feel unfamiliar. It may sense emotional states rather than physical shapes. It may feel drawn to people and places that mattered to it. And that is where the idea of the dead watching the living begins to make sense in a very different way. Not as creepy surveillance, but as attention, as attachment, as unfinished connection. Imagine leaving a place you lived in for decades. Even if you move far away, your mind still goes back there. You think about it, you picture it, you wonder what is happening there now. Death may be similar. The soul leaves the body, but the emotional gravity of relationships still pulls it back. People who die suddenly or with unfinished business are often described in stories as lingering. Not because they are trapped, but because their attention is still focused here. Their identity is still wrapped up in the people they love. This could explain why some people feel watched during moments of intense emotion. Grief, fear, joy, love. These states may be like beacons. If a soul exists nearby, no longer constrained by physical distance, it might be drawn to these emotional signals. There is also the strange phenomenon of after-death communication. People report clocks stopping at the moment of death, lights flickering, electronics behaving strangely, objects moving. While none of this is proof, it raises an interesting idea. If consciousness continues, it might try to interact with the physical world in subtle ways, not to scare, but to be noticed. Think about how hard it would be to communicate if you suddenly had no hands, no voice, no body. You might push on the environment in the only ways you could. A small electrical disturbance, a shift in air, a sensation. Many people who lose someone feel them most strongly in the days and weeks after death. Over time, the feeling fades. That fits with the idea that the soul gradually lets go of this world as it adjusts to whatever comes next. But in the beginning, there may be a period where the soul is still very close, still watching, not in judgment, not in control, just present, aware. The unsettling part is not that someone might be watching you. The unsettling part is that consciousness itself may never stop watching at all. Because if the dead are aware, then death is not a blackout. It is a change of perspective. And that means the people who loved you, who knew you, who shared memories with you, may still be able to see you in some form, at least for a while, not as a ghost in a sheet, but as a witness, quietly observing the world they once walked through. When a person leaves their body, something strange happens to time. In nearly every account of near-death or deep trance, people describe time not as a line, but as a space. Moments no longer follow one another in a neat order. They seem to exist all at once, layered, overlapping. This matters because it changes what watching even means. If you are no longer bound to a ticking clock, you are not watching in the way a living person watches television. You are not sitting somewhere waiting for things to happen. You are simply present to whatever draws your attention. And attention, for a disembodied consciousness, appears to move along emotional and relational pathways rather than physical ones. This could explain why so many people feel the presence of the dead during important moments. Births, deaths, weddings, crises, moments when emotions surge. If souls follow emotional gravity, then those peaks become like bright flares in a dark landscape, impossible to ignore. People who have had near-death experiences often describe being drawn instantly to loved ones. They don't travel there step by step. They simply find themselves there. The idea of distance seems to dissolve. If that is true, then the soul of someone who has died might not be hovering in one fixed location. It might be everywhere its attention goes. That makes the idea of being watched much less physical and much more psychological. A soul may not be standing in the corner of your room, but if it is focused on you, in whatever state it now exists, that focus might feel like a presence. Humans are surprisingly sensitive to attention. Even in the physical world, people can often tell when they are being stared at, even without seeing the person. There are subtle cues, changes in air movement, micro sounds, shifts in awareness. Now imagine an awareness without a body, without weight, without breath. Its attention might register in ways we do not consciously recognize but still feel. This could be why some people suddenly turn around in an empty room, or feel a chill, or sense that someone is there when no one is. The brain might be picking up something faint and unfamiliar, Not everything we sense comes through the five known senses. The brain is constantly processing far more information than we consciously notice. Some of it may be coming from places science has not fully mapped yet. Another strange detail in after-death reports is that people often feel as if they can see through others' eyes. They experience what someone else is feeling, not just what they are doing. They become aware of emotions and thoughts as if they were their own. This suggests that whatever state the soul enters is not limited to one viewpoint. So if a soul is aware of you, it might not be looking at you in the way a person looks. It might be experiencing your emotional state directly. Your stress, your sadness, your love, your fear. It might know how you feel without seeing what you look like. That raises a quiet but powerful idea. The dead may know when you think of them. Many people report feeling sudden waves of emotion or memory that seem to come from nowhere. A smell, a song, a feeling of someone being close. These could be random, but they often happen at moments when people are thinking deeply about someone who has died. If consciousness is connected, attention might be mutual. The living think of the dead. The dead, if aware, may feel that thought like a tug. There are also cases where people dream of someone who has died, only to wake up feeling like it was not just a dream. The person feels present, aware, intentional. Sometimes they deliver messages. Sometimes they simply appear, calm and silent. Dreams may be one of the few states where the brain relaxes enough for this kind of connection to slip through. When you are awake, your senses are locked onto the physical world, but when you dream, those filters loosen. The mind becomes more open. That may be when awareness from outside your own brain can blend with your inner experience. If that is true, then many so-called dream visits may not be imagined at all. They may be brief overlaps between two states of consciousness. The soul that has left its body might not be able to speak in words. It might communicate in feelings, images, impressions. That is exactly how dreams work. So when you feel like someone who has passed visited you in a dream, it may be because they did, in the only way they could. This leads to an unsettling but strangely comforting thought. If the dead are aware, they are not stuck watching everything you do. They are not trapped as invisible spectators of your private life. Their attention is selective. They are drawn to what matters, just like when they were alive. You don't watch every stranger on the street. You watch the people you care about. You notice when they are hurting. You check on them. You worry about them. You hope they are okay. Why would that change after death? In fact, it might become stronger. Without the distractions of a physical life, a soul's awareness may become more focused on its emotional bonds. The people it loves might become its entire world. That could explain why some people feel protected after losing someone. They describe narrow escapes, strange coincidences, sudden intuitions that saved them from danger. It feels like someone was looking out for them. Skeptics say this is just pattern seeking, but the sheer number of these stories is difficult to ignore. Across cultures, across ages, people say the same thing. After someone close to them died, things changed. They felt watched over, guided, sometimes warned. If consciousness continues, then the idea of a guardian presence is not mystical at all. It is simply someone who cares about you, no longer limited by a body. Of course, this also raises darker questions. What about people who died angry, afraid, or obsessed? What about unresolved emotions? If souls remain aware, those states might not vanish instantly. Some traditions believe that the emotional state at death influences what happens next. A calm death leads to peaceful awareness. A violent or traumatic death leads to confusion. A soul may remain focused on what just happened, replaying it, trying to understand it. That could be the root of what people call hauntings. Not malevolent spirits, but confused consciousness. Attention stuck on a moment it cannot let go of. In that case, watching might not even be intentional. It might be a loop, a memory playing again and again, imprinting itself on a place. This is not meant to scare you. It actually makes the phenomenon less frightening. It turns ghosts into something sad rather than threatening. But it also reinforces the idea that awareness does not simply turn off. When a body dies, we assume everything tied to it, the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, ceases instantly. Modern science has conditioned us to believe that consciousness is entirely dependent on the brain's electrical activity, and when that stops, you stop existing. Yet countless accounts suggest something continues. A quiet observer, separate from flesh, still aware of the world it once inhabited. Consider the simplest idea of watching. In life, your awareness is always filtered through the body. Your eyes see, your ears hear, your skin senses. You are constrained by distance, by perspective, by the limits of the senses. But a consciousness without a body is not bound in this way. It may perceive in ways that are unimaginable to the living. Emotions, intentions, and connections could become more vivid than objects. Relationships could feel more real than furniture or walls. Attention could stretch across space in an instant, noticing patterns that no human eye could see. Near-death experiences provide a glimpse of this. People describe leaving their bodies and suddenly sensing not only the room they were in, but the people connected to them by love or shared history. They describe seeing family members, sometimes far away, with a clarity that surpasses physical vision. One common theme, they often report an expanded sense of time and space, as though moments were no longer sequential, but simultaneous. Imagine watching an entire life unfold at once, not just your own, but the lives of everyone connected to you emotionally. If this is how a soul exists after death, then watching is not passive surveillance. It is an active awareness of bonds, of meaning, of energy. It is like someone reading your emotional currents instead of your body language. It is drawn to intensity. Joy, grief, love, fear, these become beacons. That is why people report feeling a presence during moments of crisis or heightened emotion, like the sudden death of a loved one or a life-changing event. The soul's attention is not random, it is magnetized by significance. But awareness without a body changes perception in subtler ways too. A deceased consciousness may experience multiple perspectives at once, shifting instantly from one point of view to another. Where once it could only observe through a pair of eyes, now it can perceive with a clarity that transcends the physical senses. Thoughts and emotions of others may register directly without translation. This could explain why some people feel felt by someone who has passed, even when they are alone. There may be no face, no voice, no hands, only the resonance of care, attachment, or memory. Emotional resonance, in this sense, may be the primary method through which souls watch. It's not a mechanical process like a security camera recording images. It is an intimate, almost invisible attention. It is tied to what mattered most in life. Consider how the living watch over loved ones. Even at a distance, parents think about children. Partners think about each other. Friends worry about one another. That concern and awareness continue in the living body. But what if it could exist independently of the body itself? A soul might extend that watchfulness beyond death, especially in the moments immediately after leaving the physical form. The timing of this awareness is significant. Reports from near-death experiences, clinical death, and spiritual traditions suggest that there is often a transitional period, sometimes hours, sometimes days, when the soul is particularly attentive to the world it left. In that time, it may linger, not as a trapped ghost, but as a focused observer. Attention may be drawn to familiar people, favourite places, and unresolved emotional threads. Even if the body is gone, the relational connections remain. Love, regret, unfinished business. These do not vanish instantly. They continue to guide the awareness that was once tied to flesh. Children often describe these presences most vividly. They see grandparents, relatives, or friends who have died standing quietly, watching, sometimes offering guidance. They rarely describe fear. Instead, they describe recognition, comfort, and sometimes curiosity. Adults conditioned to reject such ideas often reinterpret similar sensations as coincidence, imagination, or wishful thinking. Yet the consistency of these reports across cultures and generations is remarkable. They suggest that human awareness, both living and departed, may be capable of perceiving beyond the limitations of a single body. One of the most striking features of post-mortem awareness is its apparent selectivity. A soul does not, or perhaps cannot, observe everything. It gravitates toward what mattered, what is emotionally significant. It may linger near those it loved, or focus on unfinished responsibilities, unspoken words, or unresolved conflicts. In some accounts, this attention is not always conscious. It may resemble the way we sometimes replay memories automatically, without deliberate thought. A soul may revisit moments of intense emotion, hovering near the people or events that shaped it, replaying, understanding, or simply observing. This also provides insight into phenomena commonly called hauntings. Many reported hauntings are not malicious. They are echoes of unresolved attention. Objects may shift slightly, lights flicker, cold spots appear, but rarely in ways that actively harm the living. Instead, these events often occur where emotional energy is strongest, where attention is being directed by a consciousness adjusting to its new state. The pattern is not one of interference, but of observation, watching what continues in a world it once moved through. Dreams often act as bridges between these states. People frequently report visiting relatives in dreams in ways that feel more real than waking life. They describe conversations, guidance, or simple presence, and awake with an unmistakable certainty. This was not imagination. Such experiences may be glimpses into the attention of a consciousness no longer bound by a body. In dreams, the barrier between the living and the departed may relax, allowing subtle interactions that the waking mind would normally filter out. There is also evidence from near-death accounts of instantaneous movement across space. Distance no longer limits awareness. A soul can experience faraway locations as easily as the room it left behind. In these moments, observation is not limited to physical line of sight, but extends to relational or emotional proximity. Being present is more about significance than location. The soul gravitates to what matters most. The dead may therefore focus on the living not in a spooky sense, but in a profoundly relational one, watching those they cared about, sensing emotional states, feeling connected, even when they are physically absent. Science may not yet have tools to measure this, but the consistency of anecdotal reports is remarkable. Across centuries and continents, humans describe the same phenomenon. After death, awareness does not vanish. It shifts, expands, and focuses on relationships and emotions. It watches, not as an outsider, but as someone who knows intimately. The awareness of the departed is selective, relational, emotionally attuned, and most strikingly, aware of the living in ways that transcend physical presence. Even if consciousness is rooted in biology, these reports suggest that the pattern we call you is resilient. Death may not erase awareness, it may liberate it from the limits of matter. If so, the dead are not absent. They are present in ways that cannot be measured by eyes, ears, or instruments, yet may be deeply felt by the living. Feeling watched may not be an eerie warning, it may be the lingering presence of love, connection, and attention. This transforms our understanding of existence. It is no longer a simple binary, alive or dead. Awareness may be a continuum, shifting in form, expanding in scope, and persisting beyond the cessation of biological function. The dead are not necessarily wandering, haunting, or interfering. They are witnesses, observers of what once mattered most. And so, even without a body, even without speech, even without touch, the departed maintain an awareness, a silent presence, a gaze that does not judge but notices, a consciousness that continues to witness the lives it once shared, drawn always toward significance, toward love, toward memory. What this means is profound. The relationships we form, the bonds we nurture, may outlast our bodies. Love may not end at the grave. Attention, care, and awareness may persist in forms that are imperceptible yet real. The dead may be watching, not in a physical sense, but in a way that matters just as much, if not more, than sight or sound. And if that is true, the moments you share with those you love become echoes that resonate beyond a lifetime, carrying significance into dimensions we are only beginning to understand. Awareness does not simply die. It transforms, it continues, it notices. A consciousness that has left the physical form does not simply vanish. Instead, it seems to reorganize itself, shifting from a perception anchored in the body to a perception anchored in meaning and connection. In life, your attention is constrained by the senses. You can only see what your eyes can reach, hear what your ears can pick up, touch what your hands can grasp. Once free from the body, however, awareness is no longer tied to these limits. It can perceive in ways that are difficult to define. People who have had out-of-body experiences report a heightened awareness of everything around them. Not just the room or building, but relationships, emotions, and intentions. It's as if consciousness expands outward, touching threads of connection invisible to the living. This is significant because it redefines what watching means. A soul may not need eyes to see. Instead, it perceives the currents of emotion, the resonance of thought, the vibrations of memory. It is drawn toward significance. Emotional intensity acts like a magnet, pulling attention to where it matters most. Moments of grief, joy, fear, or love create points of focus. In that sense, someone who has passed may be present in ways that are subtle but undeniable. A feeling of being looked at, a sudden emotional surge, or an unexplainable awareness of another's state could all be signs of this attention. The transitional period immediately after death is especially important. Many spiritual traditions describe an initial phase where the consciousness is acutely aware of the world it has left behind. This period can last hours or even days, depending on the circumstances of death and the individual's emotional state. During this time, attention is often drawn to familiar people and places. A soul may linger near loved ones, drawn by bonds of affection, unfinished business, or emotional attachment. This is not haunting in the malevolent sense, but observation, an attentiveness rooted in connection rather than corporeal form. Children often offer some of the clearest insight into this phenomenon. Unburdened by skepticism, they report seeing relatives or friends who have died standing quietly nearby. These presences are rarely threatening. They are familiar, comforting, sometimes playful. Adults, conditioned to dismiss such experiences, often reinterpret them as imagination or coincidence. Yet the consistency of these reports across generations and cultures suggests a deeper truth. Consciousness may persist in ways that are experiential rather than physical. One of the most fascinating aspects of this continued awareness is its selective nature. A soul does not observe everything indiscriminately. It is drawn to what mattered in life: people, relationships, emotional intensity. The dead may watch moments of love, moments of grief, or moments of significance. They may gravitate toward places they loved or events they were connected to. In this sense, attention is relational, not arbitrary. It focuses on what is meaningful rather than what is merely present. This selectivity also explains some phenomena commonly attributed to hauntings. Objects moving, flickering lights, or sudden changes in temperature may not be malicious. They may represent subtle interactions or imprints of awareness on the physical world. The soul, no longer anchored by flesh, may attempt to communicate or be noticed in ways it cannot do otherwise. These are often not violent or threatening events, but gentle impressions. Hints of presence, reminders of connection, echoes of attention. Dreams act as another bridge between the living and departed. People frequently describe visits from those who have died, often appearing vividly in dreams that feel more real than waking life. In these states, the soul can communicate through images, emotions, or impressions, bypassing the need for language or physical interaction. The dreamer may awaken with an unmistakable certainty. The encounter was real, intentional, and deeply significant. Dreams, in this context, provide a rare window into the nature of post-mortem awareness, allowing subtle interactions to emerge where waking consciousness normally filters them out. Attention after death may not be confined by space. Near-death reports often describe instantaneous perception of distant locations, an awareness that transcends physical boundaries. The soul can focus on people or places that matter without the constraints of distance or time. This is not a metaphorical idea. It is consistently reported across near-death experiences and spiritual accounts. Awareness seems to exist independently of the body and can extend wherever emotional significance is strongest. The intensity of this attention is often tied to unfinished business. When a death is sudden or traumatic, the soul may linger in a state of confusion or heightened awareness. Rather than being malevolent, this focus is an attempt to process, understand, or remain connected. Objects may appear to move, lights may flicker, or subtle sensations may arise in response to this concentrated attention. These are not attacks but impressions, efforts to engage with a world the soul once inhabited. Even when the dead do not actively intervene, their presence may still be felt. People often report sudden intuitions, emotional shifts, or protective feelings that arise without explanation. Coincidences, warnings, or feelings of being watched may all be subtle signs that a consciousness, no longer confined to flesh, is attentive to the lives of those it once cared about. Awareness continues in a form that transcends ordinary perception, leaving impressions without needing to interact physically. This brings us to a profound insight. Consciousness may not simply reside in the brain. If awareness persists after death, the self may be something more than a physical byproduct. It may be a field of perception, a stream of attention that can exist independently of the body. The body acts as a conduit, a tuning device, but the signal, the awareness itself, may continue even when the device fails. That perspective reshapes the idea of being watched. It is not surveillance or intrusion, it is connection. The dead may notice, care, and witness without judgment. Attention, like love, is not confined by death. The awareness of those who have passed may still ripple through the lives of the living, detectable in fleeting feelings, memories, or intuitions. Time, too, changes after death. In life, moments are linear. After death, consciousness may perceive past, present, and future in a way that seems simultaneous. Reports describe seeing entire lives or events unfold at once, suggesting that attention is not constrained by chronological order. The soul may revisit memories, observe loved ones, and perceive connections across vast distances, unbound by conventional time. In practical terms, this means that the dead are not absent. They are not watching in the sense of controlling or judging. They are observing in the most intimate sense, noticing the people and moments that matter, attuned to emotional currents, present in ways we may feel but rarely see. Attention becomes the defining feature of continued existence. Even beyond grief or mourning, awareness may continue as a quiet, ongoing presence. Souls may linger near those they loved, drawn to emotional significance and connection. This attention is neither random nor fleeting. It is relational, persistent, and deeply human. It is the continuation of what mattered most in life: relationships, care, and awareness. The conclusion is subtle but profound. Death does not necessarily end perception, attention, or awareness. The body may cease to function, but consciousness, like a river that flows beyond its banks, can extend into spaces the living cannot reach. Watching, in this sense, is not about fear or control. It is about connection, observation, and the enduring bonds that survive, even when the physical form is gone. To be watched by the dead is not to be spied upon. It is to be recognized, to be felt, to be remembered. Awareness does not vanish at death. It transforms, focuses, and continues to touch the world it once inhabited in subtle, profound ways. The dead, in this view, are neither absent nor gone. They are present in attention, in connection, in quiet observation, a witness to the lives they once shared and still, in some way, remain part of. One of the most remarkable aspects of post-mortem awareness is the way it seems to perceive relationships rather than objects. In life, your focus is often directed at things: a chair, a book, a street, the people around you. After death, reports suggest that attention shifts dramatically. A soul no longer needs to notice walls, furniture, or physical details. It notices significance, emotional resonance, bonds that carry meaning. Near-death experiences consistently describe a heightened awareness of love, regret, joy, and sorrow. Some even report being able to feel entire families at once, their collective emotional state unfiltered by distance or sensory limitation. This suggests that consciousness may not be localized in the way we assume. Instead of being confined to a single body or mind, awareness might extend into the network of connections that defines a life. People are not just isolated beings, they are nodes in a web of emotion and experience. When someone dies, their awareness may remain tethered to that web. This relational perception can explain the sensation of being watched after someone passes. It is not that a ghost is peering over your shoulder, it is that your presence, your emotions, your choices, carry significance to a consciousness that once shared your life. Subtle signals, waves of grief, sudden joy, or deep reflection may draw attention in ways that are imperceptible yet real. Even the living sometimes detect these presences. A chill in the room, a fleeting sense of company, a feeling that someone is near. Dreams, again, play a crucial role in bridging the gap between the living and the departed. Dream visits are frequently reported as intensely real experiences. People describe conversations, guidance, warnings, or simply the presence of a loved one, often arriving precisely when their attention is most needed. These encounters are not random. They appear purposeful, focused, and aligned with emotional currents. In dreams, the barriers between dimensions of awareness may loosen, allowing interactions that the waking mind cannot normally process. Attention after death may also extend across space and time in ways that defy normal perception. Consciousness, untethered from the limitations of the body, may perceive events far away, or revisit moments from the past with clarity. Accounts of near-death experiences often describe instantaneous awareness of distant locations or simultaneous perception of multiple events. In this way, the dead may witness moments that matter, not because they are present in the room, but because significance draws attention more powerfully than physical proximity. The emotional intensity of life appears to act like a magnet. Strong feelings, love, grief, fear, excitement, may focus the attention of a soul that has departed. This could explain why some moments feel charged with unseen presence. Families report sensing a loved one's attention during moments of crisis or profound change. Individuals may feel guided, watched over, or protected in inexplicable ways. Awareness may not manipulate the world directly, but it registers through subtle impressions, intuition, and emotional resonance. Unfinished business, trauma, or sudden death can heighten this effect. A consciousness may linger, focused on understanding or processing its departure. This is not necessarily frightening or hostile. It is a kind of attentional persistence, like a mind caught in the act of remembering, learning, or reconciling. The environment may subtly respond. Objects may shift, lights may flicker, or other minor phenomena may occur, representing an imprint of awareness rather than a deliberate act. Even in cases where no physical or emotional disturbance occurs, the attentiveness of the departed may be felt by those sensitive to subtle emotional cues. Sudden intuition, flashes of memory, or the sense of being accompanied can all be evidence of a consciousness attuned to relationships rather than objects. The dead, in this sense, are not watchers in the conventional sense. They are observers of connection, feeling, and significance. Scientific perspectives offer intriguing parallels. Some theories propose that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe, not entirely generated by the brain. The brain may function as a receiver, tuning into a broader field of awareness. When the brain ceases function, the receiver stops operating, but the signal, the awareness, remains. If so, consciousness could persist beyond physical death, attending to relationships and significance rather than objects or spatial details. Cultural and historical accounts align with these observations. Ancestor veneration across cultures suggests a shared understanding that the dead remain aware, attentive, and capable of observing the living in subtle ways. The Egyptians described aspects of the soul that could return and witness the world. Tibetan traditions detail intermediate states where consciousness continues to perceive and respond. Indigenous practices speak of ancestors who remain near, guiding and observing without interference. Across continents and millennia, humans have perceived the same pattern. Death changes the form of awareness, but does not extinguish it. This has profound implications for how we understand life and relationships. If attention continues after death, the connections we form are not merely temporal. Emotional bonds, acts of love, and moments of care may persist in ways we cannot measure physically, but can experience subtly. Awareness is relational, tied to meaning rather than matter. The dead are not absent. They are witnesses, silently observing the threads of connection that once defined their lives. The concept of being watched is thus transformed. It is not surveillance or intrusion, it is recognition. Attention from a consciousness that once cared about you continues in subtle, sometimes imperceptible ways. The lingering awareness of a loved one may manifest as intuition, comfort, guidance, or the sense of being accompanied. These experiences are not supernatural in the sense of violating natural laws. They may simply reflect a deeper, relational dimension of consciousness we have yet to fully understand. Even the patterns of near-death experiences reinforce this notion. Individuals describe heightened perception, vivid clarity, instantaneous understanding, and emotional attunement. Consciousness in these states often prioritizes significance over material detail, focusing on love, connection, and meaning. These reports suggest that post-mortem awareness is not chaotic or aimless. It is directed, selective, and relational. The dead, therefore, do not simply vanish. Their attention remains. Their awareness continues to track what matters. They perceive through connections, emotional resonance, and relational significance. Their presence may be subtle, but it is tangible for those attuned to it. Love, memory, and care persist in ways that transcend physical form. In short, death does not erase attention, it transforms it. Awareness shifts from perceiving the physical world to perceiving meaning. Observation becomes selective, relational, and deeply connected to emotional significance. The dead watch, not as outsiders, but as witnesses to the lives they once shared, attuned to love, memory, and the threads of human connection that continue even after the body ceases to function. And if we embrace this understanding, we begin to see that life is not confined to the visible, the measurable, or the physical. Awareness, attention, and care may extend beyond the grave, leaving an invisible imprint that can be felt, sensed, and experienced in ways that are intimate, profound, and enduring. The dead are not gone. They are attentive, they are connected, they notice, they watch. Most of this never reaches conscious awareness, yet it shapes your perception of reality. When the brain ceases to function, this filtering mechanism disappears. That does not necessarily mean awareness disappears as well. It may simply lose its familiar boundaries. Consciousness may expand, no longer confined to a single body, and perceive in ways fundamentally different from life. Reports from near-death experiences illustrate this clearly. People describe leaving their bodies and immediately noticing multiple layers of reality at once. The room, the people around them, and simultaneously, distant locations and events. Some can perceive thoughts and feelings directly. This suggests that attention after death may operate on a different level, tuned to relationships, significance, and emotional resonance rather than physical proximity. The dead may not see in the way we understand seeing. They may perceive through patterns, feelings, and connections. This relational awareness explains why some moments feel charged with the presence of those who have passed. People often report sensing a loved one's attention during moments of danger, grief, or life-changing decisions. A sudden intuition, a flash of memory, or even an unexplainable sense of comfort can occur, suggesting that a consciousness outside the body is attuned to what matters most. These impressions may not involve physical interaction, but operate subtly through emotional resonance. Dreams remain one of the clearest avenues through which the living and departed interact. Dreams relax the filters of the waking mind, allowing encounters that feel intentional and meaningful. Loved ones who have passed often appear not only as figures, but as carriers of messages, guidance, or comfort. They communicate through emotion, symbolism, or impression, bypassing the need for words. In this state, the presence of a departed consciousness can feel vivid, real, and profoundly attentive. Distance also seems irrelevant to post-mortem awareness. Consciousness may extend across space instantaneously, drawn to significance rather than location. Near-death experiencers often describe perceiving distant events as clearly as those nearby. This ability to focus on emotional or relational importance rather than physical proximity suggests that the dead may be aware of people and events far removed from the place of death. It is attention guided by meaning, not a limitation of matter or space. Emotional intensity acts as a beacon. Grief, love, fear, and joy may attract the attention of departed awareness. This magnetism explains why people sometimes feel watched during moments of heightened emotion, or why certain locations feel charged with presence. The dead may focus on those who mattered most, tuning into their emotional currents, sensing their thoughts, and experiencing their feelings without physically manifesting. Awareness, in this context, is relational rather than spatial. Unresolved emotions and sudden or traumatic death can heighten this attentional focus. A consciousness may linger, drawn to understanding, processing, or maintaining connections. It may not interact directly, but may influence the environment subtly. Flickering lights, slight disturbances, or sensations of presence. These are not acts of control, but of attention, a way for awareness to remain connected in a world it no longer physically inhabits. Even when no physical evidence is present, the dead may still be perceptible. People often experience intuitive nudges, flashes of insight, or protective feelings they cannot explain. These may be subtle signs of an ongoing attentional connection from someone who once cared deeply. Awareness continues to notice even when it cannot act, reminding us that consciousness may not be confined to a single form. Scientific perspectives on consciousness provide additional insight. Some theories propose that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, not entirely generated by the brain. The brain may function as a receiver, tuning into a broader field. When the brain stops, the receiver ceases to operate, but the signal, awareness itself, remains. If so, consciousness could exist independently of a body, attending to relationships, emotional significance, and meaningful connections. The dead would then be capable of observation, not through sight or sound, but through connection and attentiveness. Cultural traditions reinforce this understanding. Ancestor veneration across the globe reflects a shared awareness that the departed remain attentive, observing, and capable of subtle interaction. Ancient Egyptian beliefs about the Ka and Ba, Tibetan teachings on the Bardo, and indigenous practices honoring ancestors all recognize consciousness persisting after death. In every case, the focus is on relational attention. The dead are aware, watching, and present through connection rather than corporeal form. This transforms our understanding of life and death. If attention continues, then bonds formed in life endure beyond physical existence. Love, care, and emotional connection may outlast the body, leaving an invisible imprint on those still living. The dead are not absent. They are witnesses, silently attending to the lives they once shared, drawn to emotional significance and relational importance. Being watched by the dead is therefore not fearsome or invasive. It is intimate, relational, and sometimes protective. Attention is not random or malicious. It is focused, selective, and deeply human. Consciousness may extend beyond the grave, continuing to notice, to care, and to be aware in ways we cannot fully measure but can experience. Even time itself may be experienced differently after death. Near-death accounts describe seeing events unfold simultaneously rather than sequentially. A soul may perceive past, present, and potential future in a single awareness, revisiting memories, observing loved ones, and sensing connections in ways that defy linear chronology. Watching, in this context, is multidimensional. It is perception untethered from physical constraints, focused on emotional and relational significance. In essence, the dead are not gone. They are attentive. They are not absent. They are connected. They notice not in a way that controls or intrudes, but in a way that witnesses and maintains the bonds that mattered most. Consciousness survives, shifts, and continues to care, leaving subtle traces in intuition, emotion, and memory. The reality of this is both profound and comforting. The people we love, the connections we form, and the attention we receive do not necessarily end with death. Awareness persists, not as a shadow or phantom, but as a relational, attuned presence, observing the world it once inhabited, noticing significance, and maintaining connection. Even in moments when we feel alone, even in spaces where the living are unaware, even now, the dead are attentive, the dead notice, the dead watch, not to control, not to harm, but to witness. In life, your focus is often dominated by the physical world, objects, tasks, and sensory experiences. After death, accounts suggest this focus shifts entirely toward what is emotionally significant. Relationships, memories, unfinished business, and moments of love or regret become the primary focus. The soul, freed from the body, seems to perceive the world through the lens of connection, not the lens of sight or sound. Consider how profoundly a consciousness might experience relational significance. Living humans notice details in people they care about that they ignore in strangers. Subtle gestures, changes in mood, fleeting expressions. A soul may continue this attentional pattern, only without the limitations of the physical senses. It might sense emotional shifts from afar, feel the unspoken thoughts of those it loved, or be drawn to moments charged with intensity. Attention becomes a form of presence. Awareness is relational rather than spatial. Dream encounters offer some of the clearest insights. Individuals often report dreams where the dead communicate, guide, or simply appear, fully aware and intentional. Unlike ordinary dreams, these experiences feel profoundly real and purposeful. The communication often bypasses words, instead relying on emotion, impression, or subtle imagery. The dream awakes with a sense of having been watched, acknowledged, or guided. This suggests that post-mortem attention does not require physical manifestation. It can operate entirely in a relational, emotional space. Distance, remarkably, does not seem to limit post-mortem awareness. Consciousness, no longer anchored to a body, may extend instantaneously to locations of significance. Near-death experiences often describe perceiving distant events as clearly as those nearby. A soul might observe loved ones far away, drawn to moments of emotional intensity. The dead do not need to occupy the same space to be attentive. Their awareness follows meaning, not geography. Emotional intensity acts as a beacon, drawing attention in ways that can subtly influence the living. Families report sensing deceased relatives during moments of crisis, danger, or deep emotion. Intuition, sudden insight, or protective feelings may arise without explanation. These experiences may be subtle, yet they reflect the attentiveness of a consciousness that continues to notice and care. Observation becomes subtle influence, mediated through awareness rather than physical interaction. Unfinished business, trauma, or sudden death often heighten this attentional presence. A consciousness may linger, replaying moments, processing emotions, or attempting to maintain connection. Environmental anomalies, objects shifting, flickering lights, or cold spots may occasionally accompany this awareness. These are not acts of malice, they are subtle imprints of attention, traces of a consciousness adjusting to its new state. The dead, in this sense, are observers, not intruders. Scientific theories provide intriguing parallels. Some suggest that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, not entirely generated by the brain. The brain may act as a receiver of awareness rather than its origin. When the brain ceases to function, the receiver no longer operates, but the awareness itself, the signal, persists. This perspective allows for consciousness to exist independently of a body, capable of attending to relationships, significance, and emotional resonance. The dead may thus observe not through sight or sound, but through a subtle relational awareness. Across cultures, traditions echo these insights. Ancestor veneration and rituals honoring the dead reflect the understanding that the departed remain aware and attentive. Ancient Egyptians described aspects of the soul that could return to observe the living world. Tibetan teachings on the bardo describe intermediate states where consciousness continues to perceive. Indigenous practices honor ancestors who remain near, guiding and observing. Across time and geography, human cultures have consistently recognized that death alters form, not the persistence of awareness. This understanding redefines what it means to be watched by the dead. It is not surveillance, it is presence. The awareness of those who have passed continues in subtle, relational ways. Love, concern, memory, and emotional resonance extend beyond the body, leaving impressions that can be felt through intuition, emotional shifts, or fleeting sensations. Observation becomes a form of relational continuity. Time, too, is perceived differently after death. Accounts suggest that consciousness may experience events not linearly, but as overlapping layers. The past, present, and potential future may appear simultaneously. A soul may revisit memories, observe loved ones, and sense connections across temporal boundaries. Watching is no longer constrained by the ticking clock. It becomes a multidimensional awareness attuned to significance rather than sequence. The dead are therefore neither absent nor inactive. They remain attentive. Their awareness is selective, relational, and emotionally attuned. They witness, notice, and maintain connection. Their presence may be invisible, yet it can be profoundly felt by the living through intuition, dreams, subtle sensations, and emotional resonance. This transforms our understanding of life and relationships. Connections formed in life may persist beyond the grave. Love, care, attention, and emotional bonds can leave enduring traces, detectable not by sight or measurement, but by experience and perception. The dead do not vanish. Their consciousness continues to observe and resonate with what mattered most. Being watched by the dead, then, is not something to fear. It is intimate, it is relational, it is an extension of the attentiveness, care, and love that defined life. Attention continues after death, sometimes subtly, sometimes profoundly. Awareness persists, observing not the physical form, but the meaning, emotion, and significance that once defined existence, even in moments when no one is aware, even in spaces that appear empty, even now. The dead notice, the dead care, the dead watch. Not to control, not to frighten, but to witness silently and attentively, the lives they once shared. And in that quiet observation, connection persists, bridging the boundary between life and death in ways that are subtle, profound, and enduring. The final stage of understanding post-mortem awareness is perhaps the most profound. The realization that consciousness may not merely persist, but continue to interact with the living world in ways that are subtle, relational, and deeply meaningful. Once freed from the body, attention appears to become less about observing surfaces and more about perceiving significance, the threads of connection that once gave life meaning. This transforms the notion of being watched from something frightening into something intimate, relational, and enduring. Consider the way attention works in life. Humans instinctively notice what matters. Parents notice subtle shifts in their children's moods. Friends notice tension in one another's gestures. Partners sense emotional undercurrents without words. These patterns of awareness are deeply relational. When the body dies, evidence suggests that these patterns may continue. Awareness no longer requires eyes, ears, or touch. It operates through emotional resonance, memory, and significance. The dead may sense the joy, grief, fear, and love of those they once held dear, not as observers of actions, but as witnesses to meaning. Dreams often provide a bridge for this awareness. People frequently report encounters with departed loved ones in dreams that feel more vivid and purposeful than waking life. Words may be unnecessary. Communication occurs through emotion, imagery, or subtle impression. Dream encounters often feel intentional, conveying reassurance, guidance, or simply presence. The living person may awaken with a profound certainty. The experience was real, deliberate, and relational. These interactions suggest that post-mortem attention is not passive. It is focused, relational, and deeply connected to what once mattered. Distance is no barrier. Accounts from near-death experiences and spiritual traditions suggest that awareness after death may operate independent of physical location. Consciousness may extend instantaneously to people and places of significance, drawn to emotional intensity rather than geography. This explains why some report sensing the presence of a deceased loved one across great distances or feeling guided during moments of critical importance. The dead are not confined by space, they follow significance. Emotional intensity acts as a beacon. Strong feelings, moments of love, grief, or danger appear to attract attention in ways that the living may unconsciously perceive. Intuition, sudden insight, protective feelings, or inexplicable emotional resonance may all reflect the attentiveness of a consciousness no longer bound by a body. These experiences are subtle, yet consistent across cultures and generations, pointing to a pattern. Awareness after death is relational, focused on connection, and attuned to significance. Trauma, sudden death, or unfinished business often amplifies this attentional presence. Consciousness may linger to process, understand, or maintain connection, sometimes manifesting subtle effects in the environment. Objects shifting, lights flickering, or sensations of presence. These are not signs of malice, but evidence of ongoing attentiveness. A soul's awareness may remain focused on the living, not to control, but to observe, support, or maintain bonds that persist beyond the grave. Scientific exploration of consciousness offers intriguing parallels. Some theories propose that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, not entirely a product of the brain. The brain may serve as a receiver, tuning into a broader field of awareness. When the brain ceases operation, the receiver stops, but the signal, the awareness itself, remains. This perspective allows for a form of consciousness that exists independently, capable of perceiving significance, noticing relationships, and maintaining attentional focus on what matters most. The dead may therefore continue to watch, not in a physical sense, but in a relational, meaningful one. Cultural and historical traditions reinforce these observations. Ancestor veneration, Tibetan teachings on the bardo, Egyptian beliefs in the Ka and Ba, and indigenous practices honoring ancestors all recognize consciousness persisting beyond death. Across millennia, humans have observed that the dead remain attentive, capable of subtle observation, and connected to the living through relational awareness. What unites these traditions is the understanding that death alters form, not the persistence of consciousness. This understanding transforms our concept of being watched by the dead. It is not surveillance, it is presence. Subtle, relational, attentive presence. Love, care, memory, and emotional resonance extend beyond the grave. Observation becomes relational continuity, a witness that notices significance rather than surfaces, actions, or appearances. Intuition, dreams, emotional nudges, and fleeting sensations may all reflect the enduring attentiveness of those who have passed. Time, too, is experienced differently by a consciousness no longer bound to a body. Linear sequence gives way to simultaneity. The past, present, and potential future can exist in awareness together. A soul may revisit memories, observe loved ones, and perceive connections across temporal and spatial boundaries. Watching becomes multidimensional, guided by relational importance and emotional resonance rather than chronology or proximity. Ultimately, the dead are neither absent nor inactive. They remain attentive. Their awareness is selective, relational, and emotionally attuned. They witness and notice. They maintain connection, silently and subtly, in ways the living can feel, even if they cannot measure. The bonds we form, the attention we give, and the relationships we nurture may extend beyond the limitations of physical life. Awareness persists in ways that are subtle, relational, and enduring. Being watched by the dead is not a matter of fear or intrusion. It is intimate, comforting, and profound. Attention continues beyond death, attuned to meaning, emotion, and connection. Awareness survives, observing not the material world, but the relationships, significance, and emotional currents that defined life. The dead are witnesses. They notice, they care, they watch, not to control, not to frighten, but to remain present in the lives they once shared, even when unseen, even when unnoticed, even now. And in that quiet attentiveness, connection endures, bridging life and death in ways that are subtle, powerful, and eternal.